Today with me, I have Oren Razan, who is the co-founder of SUPERWISE.
Great being here.
We also have Rishad Bhagava and Nihit Desai, who are the editors of the Machine Learning Ops Roundup.
As you see in this image and similar images, you'll see these feedback loops appear everywhere. And this is truly a highlight of kind of software 2.0. Obviously you have kind of these feedback loops in the development stage when multiple models are being trained and retrained. There might be a feedback loop involved from going from pre-prod back to development if an issue is detected. And then, when something is in production, things change, data changes, and we have to kind of retrain stuff. And this feedback loop is the kind of interesting distinction between software 1.0 and 2.0, where, in 1.0, sometimes you can be reasonably sure that, it's fairly bug-free or there are no errors. With 2.0, there are never any guarantees, right? Data always changes. They all start with something that looks like, data pipelines to collect raw data, to be able to kind of transform it, to be able to merge kind of labels for those data sets. And then, you enter the development workflow where there's going to be a data science person who is exploring the data, visualizing the data, training some models, maybe doing hyperparameter tuning. And out of all of that, a candidate model sort of gets selected. This candidate model, maybe there's additional validation tests that are done in a pre-prod setting. And then finally, this gets promoted to production. And then as part of the push to production, there's hopefully some monitoring that has been set up such that as issues come up, they're detected and a retraining process is kicked off. One of the things to kind of note here, right, is that there are many personas that are involved. You've got kind of the data science or research scientist persona who's thinking about modeling and exploring and understanding the data. You've got the software engineer or machine learning engineer who is responsible for making sure things actually get deployed. And then there's an ops person who is typically making sure that things don't go down, or if there are issues, they get looked at and triaged. There's a fourth persona that we think is kind of missing here, is the persona of a domain expert. Right? A domain expert, is often somebody who, for example, in the fintech world, who understands rules of fraud, right? And the domain expert is involved in every single one of these stages, actually. So, for example, they're involved in curating the data that the data scientist is going to be inspecting and exploring. They're sometimes involved in verifying a model just before it's kind of pushed to production. Or they might be involved when something goes wrong and somebody needs to take a look at something that seems kind of anomalous. You need the domain expert again.
There's a few sort of scenarios that this monitoring can completely help address. Differences between your training and your online, or like the inference data on which the model is expected to make predictions. An example really here would be from the Google Health AI team. It's something that we covered literally a few days ago in our newsletter. So Google sort of developed this model for detecting diabetic retinopathy from like eye images. And being Google, they, of course, were able to use state-of-the-art sort of modeling techniques to do this. And really the training data set in this case was like very clean. And then sort of as a next step, they took this out into the field and deployed this in a few hospitals in Thailand as part of like a field study. But the experience sort of trying to get this to work in the real world was mixed, right? They ran into multiple challenges. What this highlights to us is the importance of sort of having some visibility into really what is that delta between the broadly sort of, the model of the world that the model expects and really as it exists in the real world, and sort of to what extent do they align, to what extent are they different. Even if your data set that the model is operating on in the real world is actually aligned with your training data, there can often be sort of black swan events, right? That can kind of completely throw off the model, because sort of the state of the world as it exists now is like just completely different.
AI assurance that takes a very pragmatic approach to the problem of monitoring ML and looking, at the models in production, with a very data and scientific kind of lens, but also for the rest of the stakeholders, whether that is operations for them to have more independence and insights, as we had mentioned, or whether it is for the compliance aspects and the compliance users who want to reduce the risks, who want to, foster trust around the use of AI and make sure that the whole organization and every stakeholder are looking at the predictions through one single lens. And the idea of AI assurance is really about creating one truth across the organization with one clear way to measure, understand, and monitor the models.